Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be demoing some magic sound effects. So right now I'm out in my recording space and I'm going to be recording some different materials to use that we can then process, although I'll be doing a lot of really light processing for this type of work. But a bunch of different props here to show you. So we're going to record them and then assemble them. So another part of my approach when it comes to designing some of these type of sounds, or anytime I'm trying to do something that kind of goes together thematically, uh, I may I may grab a short video clip or just something that I think is cool that I'm trying to emulate, and I'll kind of use that to actually I'll basically redesign sounds for different things just as a point of reference, and then that way I can kind of see how the different layers that I've got selected kind of will be able to work together. So in this case, I pulled this from the new Warcraft Shadowlands trailer, which, if any of you know me at all, you know I am a very big Warcraft fan. So I'm always drawing inspiration from those things that come out. And this thing came out, and I just thought, man, this is such an awesome clip, and I thought it'd be a great example of just something that I could use to kind of create sketches. So, and then it also helps because the layers that I'll be kind of designing, or the when I'm doing the actual library, when I'm building a bunch of textures, sometimes if I do the mock-up like this first, it kind of lets me know where to go in terms of what type of textures I want to create, and it kind of just is another way of generating ideas, even if I'm not, my end goal is not to redesign the sound for this trailer. I'm just kind of using it as a point of reference here. So this has been whittled down. Okay, so I didn't want to, take up a ton of time to try to redo the whole design of it from scratch. So this is kind of what I landed on, and in fact, I've even got two of these layers muted that I ended up not using in the finalized sound. So let's go ahead and play the sound real quick. Okay, so it is a mixture. This particular clip is interesting because you have a mixture of fire and ice elements kind of joined together. So thinking and considering both of those, and how you're going to balance it out. This initial ignition of the mace, you can see there's flames coming out. So that definitely leads to go more in that direction. But in any case, let's just take a look at my layers here. So first of all, I think this is one of the more prominent layers. Okay. So that is the Moss recording with just a little bit of sonic enhancement. All right. So that gave me a lot of ideas of what I could do with that Moss and some of the other processing that I will show you in a minute here. This next layer, that is an impact that I created from taking the bat and hitting it against the styrofoam lid. So this thing, I crushed the hell out of it, really. I put the decapitator on there. I even have the punish on. I have played with the wet dry mix a little bit, emphasized some on the darker tones, but that's a pretty big deal. If I play it without any of these on here, that's pretty wimpy. But really, I just needed that initial. I could really have used maybe any transient. The bat on the styrofoam was just, it was a quick thing to grab when I was out there. So decapitator, transient designer, of course. So upping or kind of shaping the attack and sustain of it a bit. So I want it to be kind of thick. So I have increased the sustain a little bit. So I wanted a thicker sound. And of course, the uncompressed bat hitting the styrofoam lid is not very impressive sound on its own, but it's a clean enough recording that whenever you compress it, I was able to bring out some of the body a little bit more. And then of course, sub-synth, this is the driving factor here. Really pushing it up a lot. I'm using the harsh setting, get the drive up all the way. I get the tight punch set to around 50 hertz. So we'll hear it with that on and off. So with off, and then on. Okay, so that creates a point of the mace's ignition. And actually, the sound is kind of contoured to a certain way. I bet you could almost remove that hit if you wanted to. So here's with the hit not even in the mix. So sometimes just having a point of a very hard point that you can build and then release things from, you can almost remove it later and then still have the effect you want. I guess a good example of the difference between assembly and then editing. So that might be something you remove in the editing process. But with it in, I still think it adds something. So it's pretty subtle, but so off, on. So let's see, what's the next layer down here? Okay, so a nice airy layer. I'm pretty sure that's my air canister going on and off. It's a little movement with the filter freak. This one was already one that I recorded with a Doppler effect built in just by moving the can from left to right in front of the mic. But filter freak kind of helps to even emphasize that movement just a bit more. And whether or not I need that much movement in this, I guess that's debatable. Could probably look at that again later. He's not moving a whole lot, but it sounds cool. And then I have an EQ on there, which was just to remove some of the unnecessary low frequencies that were in that particular layer. So a filter, high pass filter. Okay, now here's the wet foam again, which one of the things I recorded that I was the most impressed with what I could do with it was that wet foam. I was able to create some nice sizzling sounds or even some nice kind of icy, snowy, crackly sounds. So that material, just depending on the way you performed it, it really yielded some very different types of material. And here, this is it's kind of like a sizzling type of sound is what I was trying to go for. So I've got an EQ on there. Again, probably just removing low frequency content. Doesn't need to be there. And then SiQ, I'm really cranked up the drive hard. Really get just a very staticky kind of dirty, sizzly sound. And we'll see more of that in the next effect as well here. So air duster, there's this another one. So this is another air duster layer. I think I just stretched it out with Varispeed a bit. Didn't really do anything else other than that. Just removed some of the low frequencies since my fire crackling and the impact sound have a lot of low frequencies. I didn't really need them there, of course. Now this layer down here, right? It's a little bit of cheating, I guess. This is a sound, like a movement transition sound from my Metal Soul library, which is a library of kind of ethereal, metal, evil kind of sounding whooshes and transitions that I built a few months back. And, rather than try to create something from scratch, I did want to put something in here that was kind of dark or evil sounding to kind of layer in with the rest of that. And I already knew, like, from the start, I'm like, oh, I have a bunch of sounds that will sit really well with this from that Metal Souls library. Now I do have a low pass filter on here, just because there are some high frequencies in that I didn't feel were needed in the blend. So there's the full sound. Alright, and then here's everything put together. Okay. I honestly cannot remember if this is my final mix or not, and the way I'm hearing it, everything seems the way I remember. Okay, so let's talk about the second part of this little effect here. So the first part, the hammer, now we have the fire. It's going to come through his chest here. So this gave me a chance to bring out a few of different elements that I'd recorded. So let's take a listen to it quick. All right. So first layer here. And again, this is whittled down from maybe what I originally started with. The most important things as far as the source recordings were the pine cones cracking, and then the wet foam, which was that green foam again, and then some of the airy or whooshy kind of sounds that are in there, and then also some similar fire layers to what I had for that first one. So first two layers, let's take a look at these. It's really just one layer, but split up into two tracks. So when I looked at this, I was looking at how the fire traveled up through his chest and up his arm. So just tried to kind of match it to that a little bit. But in any case, the whole point was just to generate some ideas. So here's the pine cones. Okay, so did not do a whole lot with those. I think, let's take a look. I think I did time stretch them a little bit, but other than that, I just have an EQ on here to remove some of the unnecessary low frequencies, and both of those are the same. Oh, you know what? Sorry, I have these going to an aux, and the aux, I'm doing some black hole processing, just like what I've been showing you. Just kind of gave it a little bit extra texture. I didn't go quite as hard with it. It's kind of blended in the mix here a little bit. We can A-B it. Oh, hang on. So without and with. If I crank it up. Turn it down. Yeah, it just adds a little extra texture there to it. All right, next to this is the wet foam. So let me see. Okay, so I only have got 3 inserts on this. Okay, there's no inserts. Here's with the EQ, which just was removing some of the lower frequencies. And psi Q. So I have a high drive amount. I'm basically just trying to get a little extra distortion out of this. And I'm sure I've got decapitator after, which is mixed in, wet, dry. Just a fairly small, high amount of distortion, but small amount in terms of the mix level. I'm sure at the time I probably played around with the order of these, and I may have started with decapitator first and then moved the order and just decided to like how it sounded better. So here's with that on. And this, again, you can kind of see, you can kind of watch how this travels. A little bit of panning going on with those as well. Nothing too crazy. But I was very surprised at how well that wet foam did in terms of creating a very convincing sizzling or kind of fiery but yet icy kind of sound. I thought it did a really great job looking for that texture. Some more of the moss crinkling. So this is going to be similar to how I processed the fire on the other layers. So heavy amounts of distortion, filter freak to create a little movement, and then subsynth for those lows to really bring out the lows, really pump them up. Air duster layer, I believe this is just stretched out, probably sending a significant amount to the reverb. Right, so I have a room reverb set up. I'm sending it quite a bit to that. So let's hear that. Okay, probably could massage the timing of that one a little bit more. And then down here again is another track from my Metal Souls library. Thought this was kind of fitting. But again, here's the full, this full effect here. Okay, so here is the complete sound layer. Play it for you. Okay, so the first effect type here that I wanted to go ahead and create is just some general kind of airy or ethereal style of sounds that could kind of be layered in with any type of other magic sounds, whether it be like a fire or ice, or really anything that you would want to do in terms of magic sound design. It's just nice to have some general good like airy kind of like whoosh bass sounds. So with that, I have 3 examples here that I'm going to kind of show you quickly. So first one, ethereal number 1. So let's just look at what the source sound is. So this is from my air duster. Hang on, let me solo that. And I have 3 different air bursts. So you don't really, you can have a couple different approaches with the magic sound design. So this approach, I am kind of looking at each source sound on its own and seeing what kind of interesting processing I can do to it to see if I can make it into a layer that I would use later. So I do have some pretty significant effects chain on this first example. Okay, so let's take a look. First, I got crystallizer, which I'm kind of just using here in an interesting way to sort of thicken the sound. So I've got the pitch slightly down a bit, and then I'm splicing a very small amount with a very short delay time, and then I'm recycling this in to the maximum, which is, you can almost think of it as like a feedback loop if you're unfamiliar. So let's hear with that on. So off, on. So it just kind of thickens it up a little bit. Next, I've got Octavox on here. So let's turn that on. So this is an interesting kind of delay plugin. Allows you to create multiple delayed signals, up to 8 different voices. You can set the delay time and the feedback amount for each voice. I'm not doing anything too terribly crazy here, but I did kind of use it just generally to help thicken it up a little bit and create something a little more complex. So here's with the Octavox. So that's pretty cool. It's starting to get pretty interesting. And actually what my kind of inspiration when I was kind of building this one, I was thinking about, I was playing a lot of one of the new Star Wars games, and I was thinking about the sound of like a force push or something like that. So here's the next thing. I've got a filter freak on here. So there you can definitely, has a very kind of force push type of vibe to it. So this effect could be really, this is pretty much most of the processing on this effect here. So the last thing on the chain is the PsyQ EQ. Again, I don't know. I've found that I just kind of like this thing for whatever reason. I like the just the way that it sounds. Sometimes I like to use it to boost the highs and then add a little bit of drive. So here's with that on. So, and then the last thing is a gate, which I only used so that whenever I commit this track, I wouldn't have a bunch of noise in between. So here, let's go from nothing to full build. So I'd say that has a pretty good kind of force push type of vibe to it, and I could easily see something like that being layered in to any other kind of effects. So that's kind of what I like to do, even if I am doing some type of sound design for a project. I like to kind of start by building a library or a bank of things that I can kind of pull from. So that'll definitely do well in there. So this time, how I started was simply taking the air duster sample. Again, this is the short bursts. So these are some short bursts I recorded. And I used the Varispeed, right? So this little guy over here, turned that on, and I stretched them out to about double their length. So here's what we have with none of the effects on yet. So again, probably already, you could already almost see that as like a flamethrower or some type of, fire bursting type of sound. So it's kind of a cleaner type of sound that I'm going here for with this fire sound. But I did, of course, do a little bit of processing to kind of try to add some flavor to it. Of course, that's always fun. So perfect plugin for doing any kind of fire or explosion sounds. Decapitator, of course. So let's put that on, see what we get. I think this second variation, I remember correctly, sounded the best. So I'll use that as the example. So Decapitator. Again, I have the drive turned all the way up. I have the tone set to dark, which is key here, but I also have the wet dry mix set more towards the dry side than the wet side, really. I'm just kind of blending that tone in. So here's off, on. So this kind of adds a little something to it. Then next I've got just a regular EQ. To be honest, I don't know how to explain this other than I just kind of was playing around, adding and boosting and cutting different frequencies, and this, for whatever reason, I landed on, I liked the way this sounded as I was doing it. So let's take a listen to that. So just kind of shaping the resonance of it a little bit there. Filter Freak. So let's hear with that on. Again, just kind of creates a little bit of movement in the frequency content. Kind of nice. Subsynth, of course. So let's hear with that. So that's pretty aggressive. PsyQ, once again. Again, I just kind of like to add this, usually towards the end of a chain. I find that it can add a little something. So without. So it just does something that I like, Flanger. Okay, now this one I kind of landed on by accident. It's one of the pedal plugins that comes with Pro Tools. And I tried different flanger plugins at this point in the chain, and for whatever reason, I liked what this one was doing the most. So pretty subtle. Again, very much sounding like a flamethrower at this point. Really subtle plate reverb. Probably could leave this on or off. At the time, I just kind of threw it on there just to add a little bit of a tail to the sound. But there is the finished flamethrower, or dragon breath layer, or whatever you. I mean, it's definitely just a good little building block, I think, to have with this finished sound here. So one of the props, the rocks that I recorded hitting together, I thought that might be an interesting thing to use as an ice kind of impact type of sound. So sure enough, with a little bit of processing, I was able to do a couple different things. I did some things where I altered the speed, so very speed processing, and got some interesting lower kind of impacts. But this example is another really interesting thing that I was able to do with Black Hole. Similar setup as before, so I'm kind of taking advantage of it from the echo or the delay perspective, and then kind of altering that size between the negative values to create tonality. And then I have primal tap on here, which is the delay, which actually, when I listened back to this, it wasn't doing a ton. But let's hear it raw or without any effects. So yeah, just a couple of rocks hitting together. Now Black Hole on here, and I do have the mix up to 100% here, so I'm really taking this to the complete level, using it for the tones that it kind of helps produce. So here's width. So you can produce with transients going through Black Hole. You can produce a lot of really interesting kind of bell-like tones or musical kind of tones, even from stuff that doesn't really have any harmonics in it, hardly at all. So that right there that's almost like a crystal-like sound. So for certain nice sounds, you might want that kind of resonant, kind of musical tone for layering in some variations. And then primal tap, a little extra delay on there, just kind of barely on there, kind of as a doubler. Let's turn the mix up because I'm curious about that. So yeah, not doing a lot, but kind of does help thicken it up just a tiny little bit. That's about it as far as this one goes. Again, thanks for watching. Let me know if there's anything you all would like to see, and we'll see you in the next one.